In this lecture, we'll talk about bargaining. In 2002, under the CHAOS, which stands for Creating Havoc Around Our System, flight attendants for Midwest Express threatened either to stage a mass walkout or strike several individual flights with no advance warning to management or customers. Now, they did this because they were trying to reach a more favorable bargaining agreement with the management. Midwest Express responded to these travel flight attendants by threatening to cancel all attendant vacation, and they threatened to lock out any flight attendant who participated in the strike. Now, on the other side, the flight attendants union promised to compensate all flight attendants from a strike fund to support any flight attendant who participated in this strike. Now, the union's biggest threat here and their main advantage was the fact that they could be effective in this strike without full implementation, that is, without striking all flights at all times in all places. In fact, the threat of striking and random strikes that were implemented was enough to push passengers to other airlines. Within 30 days of the CHAOS campaign, the management acquiesced and the union successfully negotiated a better, more favorable contract. Mastering bargaining tactics like this one is the purpose of this lecture, and it was what allowed the flight attendants and the flight attendants union to negotiate a better contract. I encourage you to take a look at the humorous but very relevant video from Monty Python posted on Canvas related to the fact that when we're trying to get a better deal for ourselves, we're supposed to haggle. Now, some of the main takeaway points from this lecture are that there are really two types of bargaining, or two perspectives from which to approach bargaining: the strategic and non-strategic view. The strategic view of bargaining models the bargaining process either as a simultaneous move game or as a sequential move game. The key insight is that the bigger share of the pie can be obtained either by changing a simultaneous move game into a sequential move game with a first mover advantage, or by committing to some type of position or committing to some course of future action that improves your outcome or improves your bargaining position. Credible commitments are difficult, and one of the reasons they're difficult is because they require you very often to commit to a course of action that actually goes against your self-interest, to commit to pursuing a course of action that you would not pursue if you were simply acting rationally, optimally, and self-interestedly. Thus, the best threat is one that you never have to actually use. The strategic view of bargaining focuses on how the bargaining outcome depends on who moves first, who can commit to a bargaining position, and whether the other player can make a counteroffer. The non-strategic view of bargaining, a different perspective, focuses on the gains relative to your alternatives to reaching an agreement. So it focuses on not the very structure of the bargaining process itself, but how much you stand to gain or lose by striking a bargain, and the same for your opponent. The main insight from the non-strategic view of bargaining is that the gains from an agreement relative to your next best alternative actually influences or helps determine the terms of trade or the terms of the bargain. Thus, one of the main insights from the non-strategic view of bargaining is that anything you can do either to increase your opponent's relative gains from reaching an agreement or to decrease your own gains from reaching an agreement will actually improve your bargaining position. So let's look at the strategic view of bargaining and talk for a minute about that. There are two complementary ways of looking at bargaining. The strategic view analyzes bargaining either as a simultaneous move game where both parties move or commit to a course of action before they know their opponent's choice, or as a sequential move game in which one player has a first mover advantage or disadvantage but moves first, and the second player formulates a response once they've observed the first player's move. Again, the non-strategic view of bargaining recognizes and was really developed by John Nash to recognize the fact that real-life negotiations don't have fixed, predetermined rules. Ultimately, the alternatives to reaching an agreement, how much you stand to gain by reaching an agreement, or how little you stand to reach an agreement, or stand to gain by reaching an agreement, dictate or help determine your relative bargaining position. In the non-strategic view, if you can increase your opponent's relative gain to reaching an agreement, that actually strengthens your bargaining position. And if you can decrease your own advantage to reaching a bargain, maybe by increasing or improving the outcome in your next best option, that increases your bargaining position. And either way, you stand to gain a bigger share of the pie. Two recent examples of firms that use this kind of idea behind non-strategic bargaining would be Bear Stearns and Texaco, companies that were threatening and in some cases actually did declare bankruptcy. But the idea of bankruptcy becomes relevant when negotiating or renegotiating terms with creditors, bondholders, or shareholders, stockholders. And in the case of Bear Stearns and Texaco, the threat of being able to go bankrupt actually changed and improved or enhanced their bargaining position. It changed the alternative to the agreement relative to a situation where they could not go bankrupt and had to negotiate a particular deal or a particular outcome with their creditors. By changing the terms of the agreement through the threat of bankruptcy, Texaco and Bear Stearns and many, many other firms have sought to alter how much they stood to gain by reaching an agreement, by changing the terms or changing the outcome of their next best agreement. Now, sometimes that threat, the threat of going bankrupt, is one that you actually have to use. And so in many instances, firms, in fact, with Bear Stearns, they did declare bankruptcy. But one of the strategic benefits of having that option is that it does alter the terms of trade. And as we'll see in another lecture, the non-strategic view of bargaining can be used as a lens through which to understand the strategic benefits of threatening to declare bankruptcy. Thanks for listening to this lecture.